Hey, welcome to ELL 214. And before we get in with our guest, Dave Rubin, I want to tell you guys about another podcast you should check out, the Matthew Spacidi program. Matthew reached out to me, and I become a fan of what he's doing because he wanted to spread the news about his financially focused podcast that also dovetails perfectly into what we believe with libertarianism, with free markets. I'm sure he's got a lot to say about what's going on with GameStop and the GameStonks, because Matthew's background is actually in financial advice, financial planning. So he's coming at this from a real position of knowledge and know-how to help you find freedom and get your financial independence in order. So check him out anywhere you can hear podcasts. The Matthew Spacidi program. That's Spociti. Matthew Spacidi program.
Welcome to Electric Libertyland, here on the Lions of Liberty podcast, your weekly shot of culture, comedy, and liberty with your host, Brian McWilliams.
Everybody, I am here with a special guest, a comedian you all know, a podcaster, a talk show host, an entrepreneur who actually started Locals.com, of course, which many of you are familiar with, especially with Tulsi the Gabbard flocking over there to ply her skills and her podcast wares. Also an author of Don't Burn This Book, Mr. Dave Rubin. Welcome to Electric Libertyland.
It's good to be with you. I like that. Tulsi the Gabbard.
It's kind of catchy, you know? It's like Winnie the Pooh, but, you know, more attractive, a little bit of a Cruella de Vil streak.
Yeah. Is a Gabbard a thing? Is that a real word?
We're going to make it a thing.
We're going to make it. It means, how about Gabbard basically means like semi-sane Democrat? Is that
I like it.
Possible?
I like it's better than Blue Dog, right? I mean, the Gabbard's catchier than a Blue Dog Democrat. I mean, who knows what you're getting with that kind of thing?
But yeah, nobody knows what a Blue Dog Democrat means anymore. There pretty much aren't any. So I like that. We could start calling the few remaining post-Order 66 decent Democrats Gabbards. That works. I love it. I'll talk to Tulsi about that.
And of course, if they decide to go the militia route, like some of the Trump supporters did, we could call them the Gabbards with scabbards, you know, sword fighting, etc. Well, you know, so today's show, I wanted to talk to you. I mean, a lot has happened since I talked to your assistant and we confirmed this, but kind of like a broad range of conversation. Obviously, we have to take into account the recent events with the GameStop / GameStonks and all that. And really what I wanted to get to, though, because you did a great interview with Jordan Belfort, of course, talking about Jimmy Kimmel and them basically carrying water for this being some sort of Russian insurgency movement, which is just madness. But my question is, are people seeing through that? And where do you fall, considering what's been happening with GameStop, you know, providing a perfect entry into showcasing kind of a red-pilled moment for a lot of people? Do we see now the system is rigged? You know, do you think this is going to wake people up? And where do you think we are after 2020?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm glad we're starting there. You know, it's funny, the interview that I posted with Jordan Belfort, for the people that don't know him, he is the Wolf of Wall Street. I mean, he is the guy that Leo DiCaprio played in the movie. I had taped that the day before all of the stuff with GameStop happened. So I didn't get to ask him about it. He's actually coming over for dinner on Thursday night.
I had no idea. I had no idea that was the case. I figured I was like, oh, what perfect timing. Yeah. I thought he came on because of that. Because I mean, a lot of what he was talking about just played in perfectly with what was going on.
No, I know. It seemed like it was perfect timing, but it was actually the day before that all happened. But he's coming over on Thursday, and I'm thinking over dinner we're going to do like a little video with a little booze, and we'll get caught up. Because he knows, obviously, all the ins and the outs and the trickery that the machine can do. And what happened here, of course, now to answer your question directly, is the people started doing tricks, right? The people started saying, okay, you guys are going to short sell these things, you hedge fund managers. You're going to make money off the destruction of these companies. And by the way, GameStop, obviously, as a brick and mortar video game store, it's like they've had their day. I was assistant manager of Electronics Boutique in Broadway Mall, Hicksville, Long Island, back in '99. So I used to, in effect, work for GameStop. Electronics Boutique became GameStop. I have a love of video games. But then when the people start coordinating on their own to do something kind of fun and throw in a couple bucks. I threw in $50, but literally thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or even millions of people basically inflating the stock price to screw over the hedge fund guys. Suddenly the system comes down crashing pretty hard. And we've got Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary.
The beloved Jen Psaki.
Yeah, the beloved. She's going to circle back to you on that. Talking about how the SEC has to look into it and suddenly trading stops. And I have heard a little bit, though, and I think this will unfold a little bit more. At first, it really sounded like Robinhood was trying to screw the people by stopping the trade, as if they got a call from somebody at the SEC or one of the hedge funds or whatever. Now it sounds a bit more complicated, as if they actually were running out of liquidity because there was so much happening once. I don't know all the answers on all of that stuff. I don't think anyone has all the answers on all that yet. But to directly answer your question, yes, I think people are seeing through the facade. The way that so many of us over the last couple of years were red-pilled to see through the media nonsense, red-pilled to see through the political establishment nonsense. The next version of it is the financial market. So it's like, didn't surprise me at all. Like, the financial market is not where I spend most of my time thinking. I'm a free market guy, and I love the idea that people can get involved and fight the system. But it doesn't surprise me because we're in a time of what Ben Shapiro calls a disintegration. And for those of us that are free market people, we got to figure out ways to build better things into the future, because a lot of the things that we have come accustomed to are collapsing.
Yeah, well, that actually is, one of the things I wanted to work our way into. And, here we go. I got a little lag there in my video. Hopefully I'm still coming through to you. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, too, is, talking about pills. And I'm going to call this Pill Popping with Dave Rubin. I figure that's a catchy enough title.
There you go.
Are you familiar with the white pill, black pill? There's red pill, blue pill. So that's what I wanted to ask you, because I haven't really heard you talk about this much, are you looking at this as a white pilled kind of scenario where we're seeing the downfall, or not the downfall, but the cracks appear in the financial industries? We're seeing Fauci and we're seeing all these governors flip-flop on COVID. What's good is, what's good for them to go out in restaurants and eat with their families. Famously, I live in LA as well. Seeing the woman go out to eat after shutting these restaurants down. Do you look at this and you say, this is a chance for us to cut through and rebuild? This collapsing is actually good for liberty, good for freedom. Or are you taking more of a black pill approach to what's going on now, watching censorship, watching authoritarianism, and seeing? I'm curious to see where you fall on that.
Yeah, I think you can argue it either way, and I think a little bit of it is sort of where your fear center is and, how innovative you want to be. I'm guessing that most people that watch your show, listen to this podcast, as more liberty-minded people, part of what comes with being someone that cares about liberty, cares about freedom, believes in individual responsibility, is you should always be looking for opportunity to build something, to do something cool, to get into the competitive market, to come up with a new idea, to build a new business or new institution. So with all of the chaos, I can see why a lot of people would be black-pilled right now. And after what happened with the election and everything else, I could see why a lot of people would be like, man, the system is rigged. The media is against us. The politicians are against us. The financial markets are against us. Like, I'm just checking out. I'm depressed. I can't deal with it. And, I'm going to smoke weed and watch porn all day. Like, I can honestly see that version. I really could see that. On the other hand, I think the white-pilled version of it, which usually starts with the red-pilled, is that once you see the world as it is, that it is this sort of imperfect mess. And by the way, all these institutions that are now rotting, it's not like they were all built intentionally to be bad. Things sort of got bad over time. Our educational institutions and our colleges were not always bad. It's the last 20 years or so that they were really infected by wokeism. But does Harvard, if you look at it this way, I hear a lot of my more liberal friends, whoever will still talk to me, they still talk to me about the importance of Harvard. And in my mind, it's like, no, Harvard at this point is irrelevant to the average person. Harvard has decided that they will allow wokeism in. They rescinded their offer to Kyle Kashuv, who was the gun rights activist after the Parkland shooting, who was graduated first in his class and was an absolute all-star. and they put in that other kid, David Hogg, who had lesser grades, but he's woke, so he fits. Harvard also discriminates against Asian students.
Yep.
That is systemic racism. If you are Asian, it's harder to get into Harvard. I thought we're supposed to care about racism, but apparently not when it comes to Asian people who work hard and study and focus on family and have climbed the socioeconomic ladder properly. So I don't care if some of these institutions fail. That being said, when a lot of things collapse at once, it can be a scary time for people. If you would have said to any of us a year ago today, did you anticipate that we'd basically be locked in our homes, the economy would be destroyed, all of this stuff would be exposed and everything else? People would say, you're nuts. Right. But that was a year ago. A year ago right now was still before COVID. I mean, it started all about 10 months ago with all the lockdowns and everything. So time moves by very fast. But I would say the white-pilled version, and it's what keeps me going, is that when all hell's breaking loose, when it feels like things are crumbling, there's huge opportunity. I mean, there will be new businesses. People thought Enron was too big to fail. People thought Dell Computers or Gateway 2000 or Kodak or any of the dinosaurs of the past, that these things will never collapse. Well, I actually believe Google will collapse eventually. It will, David versus Goliath. Google will become so big, and it will, by the way, inject all of that woke nonsense, and they won't hire the best engineers. They'll hire engineers based on skin color and sexuality. And guess what? Some company, maybe it'll be locals.com, where I don't hire based on skin color or sexuality. You know what I hire by? It's crazy. If you know how to do your job and you've studied and you work hard, you seem like a good person, we hire you.
I was going to say drinking contest. That's the way I've done all my hiring throughout my career. But
exactly, though. I mean, the point is, like, there are ways to hire people to build good things. There's ways to hire people to build bad things. And I think these things will have gone from too big to fail to too big to succeed. And if we can accelerate that process, I guess that's all right.
I think you just hit on a key that I've been talking about on my show for quite some time, especially when it pertains to cancel culture and an environment of wokeism, is that I was actually rooting on, and I'm not a collapsitarian or a black pill guy necessarily where I think it's all going to end, but I was telling people that, the cliched boiling frog when it comes to what is or isn't permissible in public discourse, for jokes, for television content, for what you and I are talking about today, people are getting canceled. However, it was people that they could point to, like the Alex Joneses with this coordinated deplatforming, and say, well, he was talking about Sandy Hook. He was an evil man. So, of course, you would check him off. But then what happens is that, of course, slowly over time, you expand what that bubble is until people are getting canceled overall. But if it happens slowly enough, people don't realize it. So I was saying we need, the acceleration of this so that you get people like Chris Pratt being canceled. Ostensibly a nice guy, everyday Joe who happens to have hit it big, but a Christian, and they attacked him for that. So I thought that acceleration is actually the way to shake people out of their modus of just kind of letting it happen and showcase, look, this thing is happening. It can happen to you. It can happen to anybody. So where do you fall on that? I mean, do you think people are getting to that point, especially when it comes to broader entertainment? I mean, you were a comedian. I've done some stand-up in my day, and I moved to LA to be a writer. But, where do you think we're standing right now?
Yeah, it's interesting because my friend Michael Malice, who I'm sure you know of, he often talks about how conservatism is just liberalism at the speed limit. And I think that's really what your point is, that we can do all this slowly, right? We can just slowly keep collapsing. Or maybe the acceleration would actually be better because it would be more obviously in front of us, as opposed to the frog who doesn't know he's boiling. And then all these things kind of keep happening. And then a year goes by and you've been locked in your house for a year. And then they announce, oh, actually, we just need 100 more days. And then after 100 more days, they tell you, oh, you got to walk outside with, a bubble around your head,
7 masks
saran wrap. Yeah, and just more and more and more. That's a pretty good argument for like, oh, let's accelerate it so it happens. We know it happens. We still remember the past, and we can build now. One of the things that I say to my director or my producer often, who are in their mid-20s, is that you guys, I'm 44, not that old, but, I'm not in my 20s anymore. Is that you guys are going to be like the last adults to remember the old world. Mm-hmm. Meaning that if you're in your 20s now, you're going to remember some semblance of the old world as a somewhat functional human being. as opposed to a 15-year-old that's, you know, going to only remember it through the context of being a kid. And I think the wisdom that existed in the old world should not just be thrown away. And the things that we care about it from the old world, about hard work and individual rights and things like that, those are things that have to be preserved. But should we accelerate it? I don't know exactly what you would do to accelerate it, other than be aware right now. Be aware right now of who is looking at the world in a new way, who's desperately trying to hold on, who's doing some in-between version of that, and figure out, you know, man, if you thought your whole career was going to be having to commute to the city, you know, my dad just retired at 71. He retired last year. He had the same job at a company in New York City. He was in sales, but basically commuted from Long Island to New York City 2 hours a day, same train, 5 days a week, for, you know, roughly for like 35, 40 years. I actually did the math on it. I mean, 2 years of the man's life, God bless him, were on that Long Island Railroad train to get to the job, to allow his family to live the way that that he wanted. I love him for it. I credit him for it. But that's a very different world than someone that's getting into the workforce now will see. And you got to map it out for you.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You talk about getting into the workforce right now and also this younger generation. I've had some interesting experiences kind of seeing a different pushback. And maybe it's just the nature of rebellion, right? Because we've got these kids that are, you know, again, resisting Trump, which is hilarious when they elect Joe Biden, you know, who's the establishment shill. But I think you're seeing a younger
Joe
generation.
Biden will save you.
Yeah. Go look to this doddering old fool. He'll come in and lift you up on his, put him on his shoulders. Yeah. But I'm seeing some of my friends, and I have a 1-year-old daughter, right? So I'm 41, right? 41. So I'm not that much younger than you, but I'm seeing some of these 15-year-olds, you know, 18-year-olds. They are really coming out of this, especially I think with the lockdowns. But they're coming out of it from a perspective of not trusting and not really listening to a lot of the traditional media. You know, so the gatekeepers of those truths are pretty much out of their sphere of relevancy. And it seems to me from talking to them like they know about Kamala Harris's police record. You know, they're not fans. They know about these lockdowns, and they're very suspicious of what all, you know, the wokeism that everybody's adopting and these truths that are being put out there right now. I don't know if you have any experience talking to the youngins, but I'd be curious to hear.
Yeah. Well, I get that. I mean, you know, unfortunately, I only did one public speaking event of all of 2020.
Before they shut us down.
Well, it was actually at the end. I did it right before Christmas. I did an event in Florida. But so my first and last speaking event was literally the last week of the year, which was pretty depressing. But usually when I get out there, I do a ton of stuff at colleges. And it's like, if I even just say CNN, if I'm just up there and I say CNN, people start laughing. Like CNN is the punchline. Just in the last hour or so before I jumped on with you, there was a clip of CNN going viral where they have a legal analyst on there talking about the nonsensical Trump impeachment situation. Mm-hmm. And she says that the First Amendment does not protect your right to lie. That is completely untrue. First off, if that was true, then we'd all be in jail, because every one of us is a liar, right? So we've all lied. Everyone has lied in life, okay? So first off, it's just ridiculous. But also, she says that up there. John King is the host. He must know that that's not true. Of course you can lie. Everyone lies. You know, everyone has lied. But she just says it, and then they just keep going with the segment. So CNN, if she's telling you the truth that you're not allowed to lie by the First Amendment, well, she just lied about it, and then I would assume CNN would be in some sort of hot water over the lie. But, you know, it's just all drivel. All they have to do, I mean, I say this all the time, but all mainstream media had to do for these last couple of years was not be completely horrible. Mm. We would have accepted mostly horrible. Perhaps we'd accepted it.
Par for the course,
Well, that's the thing. Before the internet, we didn't know what we were accepting, right? So perhaps we would have accepted endless lies and nonsense had the internet not arrived. Then once the internet comes, it's not that everything that everyone on the internet is saying is true, obviously, but it allows you to see the narrative being built in real time. It allows you, every time some nonsensical thing is said on CNN, which is exactly what happened, the views of this woman being taken down on Twitter by people like me will be more than the people that saw it on CNN in the first place.
Sure.
So that's the point. That's how we fight back. But by the way, that's why they would love to kick us all off these platforms.
Oh,
because
precisely.
they ain't happy with the fact checking.
I think, yeah, exactly. The fact checking. And I think you bring up a good point about people going on the internet. And then I think that people are coming up with far better truth filters than they ever had before. And, when you've got mainstream media, fake news, of course, was not Trump. Trump came to own the phrase, but it was actually coined, I believe, by CNN when talking about these alternative news sources. So it's interesting to see people come up, and I think they have to hone their bullshometers or bullshitometers because you are constantly online exposed to memes and lies and jokes and ruses. And some of it's true and some of it's not. But I would say, arguably, people now are more fine-tuned into what they're being sold and whether or not it has some ounce of fact to it or if it's just total garbage. And it just so happens most of the garbage is coming from the mainstream established sources. Hey guys, real quick, I want to take a break to tell you about a no garbage institution. That is Zippix toothpicks. Zippix nicotine infused toothpicks. You can find them at zippixtoothpicks.com. They have been a long sponsor for the show now, a couple months now, and I don't see any end in sight because they are offering a fantastic product that not only helps you to kind of curb those cravings for cigarettes or chew or vaping, but also comes in 8 awesome flavors to give you that little buzz and that hand-to-mouth feel without having to smoke a cigarette or take a hit of that vape pen. As I mentioned, I have a buddy who actually managed to stop vaping completely by using these. I myself like to use them if I'm doing a podcast, if I'm having a drink. Not only that, but I was hungover. Imagine that. I was hungover this past weekend after breaking my fast of not drinking and doing a dry January, and I did not feel so great on Saturday morning this Saturday. But I popped some of the B12 energy and caffeine toothpicks they also have, and I'll tell you what, I was able to look my 1-year-old baby in the face. And isn't that what every father wants? To be not hungover enough to take care of his own child. So check those out using promo code LION. Get 10% off your first order. Go to Zippix, Zippix, toothpicks.com. I guarantee you will not regret it.
Yeah, well, if to jump back a little bit earlier to your question about like college age kids and not trusting any of this stuff, I mean, that's kind of a beautiful thing, but it also, there is a danger there because if we cannot agree at some level what the truth is, then what gives us some sort of national cohesion? And maybe what that really means is that, and this is a very libertarian idea, that we will constantly have to turn inward, meaning turn more to your family, more to your local community, more to where, physically where you live to find some community sense making, and that we just won't have any communal sense making at a national level. I mean, I don't sense that there is any communal sense making at the national level. It simply doesn't exist.
That's where I'm kind of white pilled in a way, and that's where, interestingly enough, the whole game stocks thing, the whole looking at the establishment, Elizabeth Warren saying that we need to crack down because God forbid, champion of the people, Elizabeth Warren how dare she try to take our side?
Real progressive hero. Immediately Wall Street's in trouble and the mask
regulate those bastards. Yeah, so I looked to that though, and that's where I was talking about coming together, and I was wondering if this is going to be that moment of red pilling, not of course on the left-right spectrum, but red pilling as far as us versus them, government versus freedom spectrum. If this is something where we can all agree for once, because that's been so few and far between that we've actually been able to agree on something being good or bad. Even something like the war in Yemen, you have people defending it. This is something that it seemed both sides unanimously looked at and went, this is some shit.
Well, that's the irony, is that you're right. You had Ted Cruz and AOC agreeing on something, which there was a moment where it's like, okay, let's get to work, people. Maybe we're all seeing the BS at the same time. But then what did AOC do immediately later? A minute after, she's telling, she's announcing to the world that Ted Cruz tried to have her killed, which of course is complete nonsense. So
I mean, maybe she knows something we don't. Maybe Ted's outside the bushes. I don't know what he does at night.
No, AOC does not know something we don't. I assure you, she does not. She's sort of like the worst type of politician in that it's ironic. She's young and she's pretty and she gets social media, but what she actually is a vestige of the old game, of the game where everyone that opposes you is evil and a white supremacist and a racist, and now they're actually trying to kill you. She's a vestige of something that doesn't work. And I think to the bring both sides together part, well, all right, well then we've got a moment here, because there's pretty much nobody on either side except for really the radical lefties, and it's hard to figure out how many of them there really are. Like if you look on the right, like there's really no politicians that are universally loved. There was Trump. So let's remove Trump for a second since he's been banned to the netherworld. So if someone said to me, well, Dave, who do you like? I would tell you, I basically like Ted Cruz. I basically like Rand Paul. There's probably a couple more like libertarian minded, but I don't need these people. I don't believe that politics is everything. On the left, I suppose there would be a lot of people who would say, I love AOC, I love Bernie, I love Ilhan Omar, whatever, because they see so much of their intrinsic human value tied into politics and politicians. But the broader point would be, if you were to say to somebody, well, name 10 politicians you like, nobody can do it. And that then shows you that the proof is there that, hey, maybe in a new technology-driven world, we just don't need these people. Not to say we don't need any government. I'm not an anarchist. I actually sort of intellectually am in a way, but like I'm also a realist, which is why I still, believe that you have to have some government. It's just the best
for now, baby steps.
Yeah, small steps. Michael Malice, small steps, right? But
Right.
but in a technologically driven world, we have to rethink this and go, well, wait a minute. Just because this AOC was, elected by 100,000 people in the Bronx or something, she shouldn't have anything to do with my life 3,000 miles away. And we better really start understanding that.
Yeah. Well, this leads me into another question for you. We had on our podcast, we've been hosting a lot of debates, right? We had Dave Smith, part of the problem, if you're familiar with him, and former Senator Eric Brakey on, and they had argued whether or not the future for liberty was best placed in the hands of the Libertarian Party or the GOP, i.e. trying to go the Ron Paul route, or to try to make the Libertarian Party respectable, redeemable, a trick in its own right, especially since they adopted wokeism and had an abysmal showing. So where do you come down on that?
I love this topic. I'd be happy to discuss it with those guys, with you. Look, I think there's a strategic version of this. There's like sort of like a purist version of this, and then there's like just the reality version of this. So as far as a party, the Libertarian Party is just an absolute joke. They're just a joke. Look, I voted for Gary Johnson the first time around. I'd like to smoke pot with the guy. I've met him. He's a nice guy, but he was a terrible candidate. Jo Jorgensen was again, a perfectly nice woman. I had her on my show. She made the mistake of asking me at the end, are you going to vote for me? And I was like, no, there's too much at stake. Like, yeah, I like your ideas, but like if they wanted to really, jolt the system, she was obviously not the candidate.
It's like also, putting a frozen milk popsicle up there and expecting people to get very excited. It's just not going to do it.
It ain't going to do it. And then on top of everything else, they do nothing down ticket, basically. So it's like, it's like you're just like an amateur show. Like, oh, every 4 years we find some marginal person to throw up there, and then that's kind of it. So I would argue that the best thing you could do, and by the way, this is why I supported Trump, is that to me it seems that the conservative movement has a pretty wide tent right now. I would say you've got sort of the libertarian wing that would be on the more center side that, is more okay with some of the social stuff, or the stuff that libertarians like, gay marriage. Nobody cares about that anymore, really. I'm personally pro-choice, begrudgingly so, but having some movement on that.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Then you have your more traditional religious conservatives, people that want to use the state a little bit more. I've argued this with Tucker Carlson many times. I didn't want the government to regulate big tech. Maybe I was wrong. I think there's many ways to skin a cat. You had someone like Tucker wanting to regulate, even though that's generally not a conservative principle. The point is, we're obviously on the same side of things. So I think just the realist version of this is you got to fight within the system as it exists for now. I don't see any real way a Libertarian Party, like basically, look, if me and every sort of relatively influential liberty-minded person said, okay, we're supporting the Libertarian Party, let's say we did something extraordinary, like beyond imagination. We got them to 15%, crazy bananas numbers. Well, what do? You ensure that the Democrats remain in power. That's just reality. So it's a sucky reality. And by the way, I'll just say one other thing, which is I get the other position on this. I think Smith was basically saying you got to take the party over, right?
Right,
That,
yeah,
that
because
was
that's the
implication.
passive. It's the least resistance as opposed to trying to take over the GOP. That's correct.
So I'm sympathetic to that. I'd be happy to discuss it with him, but I just sense that the pain point of what you'd be handing over for a couple of years would be too high. And again, this is the irony of the Trump thing. Trump did a lot of things that were very libertarian minded in that he didn't start wars, he cut regulation, he lowered taxes. Even the COVID stuff, you can argue whether he did the right thing or not, but he handed it back to the states. It's
right,
like,
states' rights is yeah, exactly, better than a federal mandate.
We basically got as close to a libertarian president, certainly as there's been in our lifetime.
Agreed.
So I think you work with that, but I could see it argued either way.
All right. Well, I know we're running out of time. I want to ask you one more question. We're here in Los Angeles. I don't know if you heard
what the high hell are you doing here, man? What are you doing?
What are you still doing here? I mean, come on. What are we either of us doing here? It's horrible. But the most recent madness is, of course, I'm sure you heard about this. They allowed the restaurants to have outdoor dining, 25% capacity. But now, right before Super Bowl Sunday, they said they're not allowed to have their televisions on the patios. So what will you be doing for the Super Bowl, and dare you bring and watch television on your phone at an outdoor restaurant?
Little do they know, most of us are walking around with these incredible devices that are in your pocket and can show you video and audio. It's rather remarkable. So I think we're going to have a couple people here for the Super Bowl, which I'm not even sure. Is that legal now or not? I'm not even sure. Nobody cares. I mean, we are
as long as they don't use your bathroom, right? That's
yeah, exactly. We are governed. Yeah, we just put a bucket outside. Look, we are governed by complete morons and idiots and hypocrites and buffoons from the top to bottom. Our governor here, Gavin Newsom, is, I would say, he's probably the second worst. I actually think Andrew Cuomo might be worse and more dangerous in a certain regard. But I'm completely for the recall of Gavin Newsom. Eric Garcetti's just an idiot who will kneel in June in the midst of the height of the pandemic without a mask on. He'll kneel in front of Black Lives Matter people, like bowing to them as if they're the Pharaoh. And then he'll also, tell us that we have to cancel everything. We've got these ridiculous people like City Supervisor Sheila Kuhl, who is the deciding vote 3-2 to close outdoor dining. And then she goes outdoor dining that very night. I mean, the litany of ridiculous people we have. But, my friend, the white pill of this is that I'm meeting an awful lot of people in LA who have absolutely had it. When I've gone to some of these rallies, the people that I meet there about opening up the city and opening up the state, these are not political people. These are not conservatives, but they've had it. They hate the Democrats. They hate Garcetti. They hate Newsom. They just want to live their lives. So that is the mass red pilling. And let's get this guy recalled and let's see what happens. Although in this banana state, we'll probably recall him and then vote in
somebody far worse will come
left.
in. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, and that's something too. You always say, why are we both here? Somebody's got to fight for this damn city, right? So I guess it's you and I.
Listen. I know we're tight here, but I'll tell you one other thing. So I had, Michael Knowles from the Daily Wire.
Yeah.
So I
don't know him personally,
Knowles,
but I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had him over for dinner with his wife. We're having a great time. This is a couple months ago. And we're talking about, should we stay or go? Should we stay or go? And I'm going, listen, if we stay and fight, we have a chance. It's like, because the truth is that if guys like you and I leave LA and say, okay, we can't live in California anymore, well, then the union is over. I mean, then we really do have a situation where the United States of America will no longer be united. That's a very dangerous position, because I think we'd be in perpetual war with each other. But anyway, so Knowles and I, we drinking whiskey, we're getting drunk, and basically we're like, all right, we're staying, that's it. I wake up the next morning, I open up my phone, Daily Wire announces they're moving to Nashville. Michael Knowles on his way to Nashville. He didn't know. I guess there
really?
talks.
I thought he was just like, how's the whiskey morning talking, Dave? I'm out of here.
Yeah. So, well, look, I'm glad you're here. It's nice to know that there's a couple of other sane people here. And,
without a doubt.
We just got, really, if we keep fighting, we can change things for the better. It's the only way you can look at the world and not go bananas.
Yeah, agreed. Well, Dave, do you want to wrap up? Do you have any, obviously locals.com, the Rubin Report everywhere. Anything else you want to tell people about before you go?
I mean, locals is where I'm spending most of my energy right now. I didn't just want to complain about big tech. I started a company called locals.com. It's built within a completely libertarian mindset of how we should treat social media, that we should have small communities first. We build digital homes. We build homes for creators the way you would buy a house and then the house builder gets out of the way. That's what we do for you. We're a tech company, not a platform. We build you your house for your video, your audio, your community, your rules, your data. And then it has nothing to do with us. And if you break the laws of the United States, you got bigger problems than Dave Rubin. So locals.com and my locals is rubinreport.locals.com.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on ELL, and look forward to listening to you for many years in the future. Don't leave LA yet, and if you do, let me know so I know that the last rats are fleeing the ship.
You don't want to be the last guy in Dodge. I'll send you a note.
All right, thanks. Thanks again for coming on. Talk soon.